Welcome back to the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame YouTube channel. My name is Ed Helinski. Glad you could join us here today. We're taking a stroll down memory lane. This one, Niagara Falls, the early to mid 1970s, when Niagara Falls was known as the Power Cats. Joining me today for this stroll, attorney Bob Simpson in his Western New York office, and from Atlanta, Georgia, the one and the only Larry Williams. Guys, glad to have you today. Thanks so much. I think this is going to be a little bit of fun this afternoon. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. I haven't seen this guy since 1974.
No.
And he looks like he's still in shape, just like that number 32 behiin him.
Yes, I'm trying.
Don't ever forget, guys, round is a shape. Don't ever forget that. Hey, I want to talk to you guys about growing up in Niagara Falls and your first football experience. Were you guys sandlot or were you organized in your youth football situations back then?
Go ahead, Bob. You can start.
Well, I started with the Niagara Falls Knights, I think 1966, 67. Cataract Little Loop Football Association, Tyro football. We had a 100-pound weight class. And I remember the first year I tried out, I was 10 years old. I weighed 76 pounds. And coach, I think it was John Gabriel, a firefighter, he looked at me and he said, "Bob, you're pretty fast, but I don't think you're fast enough to not get hurt at 76 pounds. So he put me on the taxi squad. And my job that whole season was to watch, learn, and cut up oranges at halftime for the people who were, making a sweat out on the field." So how about you, Larry? When did you start?
Well, actually, I started because I grew up with the Brundages, Bruce, his cousin Dew, a lot of the guys who had played Tyro. I didn't even know there was a Tyro league. So we all went to Beach Avenue Elementary School. And so at recess, we would go out and we played football, right? And so they started talking about, Bruce was telling me he played organized football. I'm like, organized football, really? And so I did a little research and I let my father know. Then he signed me up and I played with the Knights, 105 pounds. And so that was my, prior to that, just like all the other kids, we didn't have any electronics. So we were out playing sandlot football all the time. And so once I got introduced to it, then, like you, I grew up doing the playing Tyro football, and Coach Gabriel, he was my coach, and we had a ball. Jeff Cum was the quarterback at the time, and it was Mike Barone. He was on the team, and I remember a couple of other kids, Rotella, but we had a great time. I loved it. So that was my intro to it.
Describe, coming up, did you guys play freshman football, then JV, then varsity, or did you play, but when you reached varsity, was it as a sophomore or a junior, or how did that work out for both of you?
Well, we had so much fun playing Tyro. I mean, we had a ball. And so I didn't play junior high school football at Gaskill. We played for the Moose Bulls. And the year before we played with the Moose Bulls, they had lost to West Seneca. And I remember that they were so brokenhearted. And that year we played for the Moose Bulls. I knew we had a good team. I mean, I knew we had a good team. And West Seneca came in there. They hadn't been beaten for years. But they lost that day. Yeah, they lost that day though when they came out to LaSalle. Yeah, we got them.
They were undefeated for 6 years, and in this program, I wrote down the scores. Let's see. We beat, how much did we beat them by? 42-12 on October 25th at LaSalle Junior High. Yes. Yours truly scored the first touchdown on a fly pattern pass play. Yes. And but you know what might be interesting, Ed, since this is the North Tonawanda Hall of Fame, that year, we're talking 1970 Tyro football Moose Bulls. our team that year, we had a perfect season. Larry and I share something in common in that not only have we been really, good friends for 50 years, we both played on teams with perfect seasons. And in 1970, we were 12-0. 1973, we'll talk about that in a minute. Yes. But in any event, North Tonawanda in the Western New York Tyro football 125-pound division, 1970, had 2 teams. So there must have been, 60, 70 kids. And I think they were out to get us in 1973, and I'll tell you why. On October 11th at Colonel Payne Field, we beat the North Tonawanda 49ers 62-0. It was embarrassing. And then on November 8th, our final game of the regular season, we played the North Tonawanda Tigers, separate team. You had that many kids in NT. We beat them 36-6. And I think we were undefeated, as Larry said, that the West Seneca Lions dominated that league for years. They were undefeated 6 years when we beat them for the first time. Anyway, we went to the Milk Bowl. That's MILK, Milk for Health in the Niagara Frontier. And our Milk Bowl game was November 22nd, 1970, in the pouring rain at Rotary Field, yes. UB. Yes. I mean, the mud was thick. Yes. You couldn't throw the ball. You couldn't run. Yes. And it was a real nail biter. And we beat the North Tonawanda Tigers 6-0. And I'm pretty sure they remembered that for the next 3 years and decided to get even.
That's funny you should mention that, because of the Niagara. Describe the Niagara Frontier League back then. It was pretty competitive, wasn't it?
Oh, for sure. Because I played JV. I started playing JV in the 9th grade, and then, it was the 10th. I think was it the 10th grade?
Larry.
10th grade, right? And then we had a pretty decent team, and then our junior year we had a pretty good team, and the senior year, we don't really like to talk about that a whole lot. It wasn't a really good year for us, our senior season. I remember the North Tonawanda game, and I remember our first game against Niagara Wheatfield, and I remember the last game, because in that first game, a quarterback, which I shall not name, or we'll leave his name out of this. It was the first year they had the rule where you had to have your mouthpiece in the whole game. And so I remember breaking off. We played Niagara Wheatfield. I broke off a 50-yard touchdown run. So I remember they blow the whistle, and it's like, what's going on? What's going on? Sure enough, this guy who shall remain nameless, but I think I'll name him anyway. Marty Schimmel. He's running down the field with his mouthpiece out, and they called back my touchdown. And that was the only touchdown I would have scored that year. So I kept in my mind how Marty messed me up, right? So our last game was against LaSalle. Last play of the game. And all season long, I'm thinking, I'm going to get Marty back. I'm going to get him back. He screwed up my touchdown. So the last play of the game, he scrambles. I get open in the end zone. I see the ball coming to me, and I'm thinking, oh, I got him now. And I dropped the pass. Hit me right in the hands. I dropped the pass. I didn't want him to get any headlines or anything. And I dropped that pass, and we lost that game. And it hurt me, but I got him back. I finally got him back. But we had a lot of fun, though, because we all grew up together, from Tyro all the way through. We grew up together. And listen, I'm so proud of this guy. I've just finished reading this book the other day, and it brought back so many memories, But we had a good time. And growing up in Niagara Falls, seriously, I couldn't think of a better place to grow up. And we had a lot of fun. We really did.
Ed, I love that story. And Larry, I just want you to know I was in the other corner of the end zone watching that ball from Marty's hand through. And I was doing the sign of the cross, and I was praying. But I had mixed feelings, because I knew you had a thing with Marty and his mouthpiece. So, but to answer your question, Ed, back then, the Tyro League was like the feeder, like the minor leagues for the Niagara Frontier League. You know, you had West Seneca Lions, South Buffalo Shamrocks, West Side Bulls, Brant Raiders. NT sent 2 teams. There were the Newport Frontiersmen, the Lockport Bandits, the Cheektowaga Thunderjets, the Tomahawk Warriors, the Parkview Cadets, the Stingray Americans, and a team I don't remember. We thought we were in the NFL. I mean, you know, every Sunday was a really big. We even played a team. I don't know if you remember this, Larry. We were like really good and undefeated, and they were having trouble finding us competition. They went to New Jersey, and they found a team from New Jersey that my parents told me they were the Eastern Seaboard champions. They brought them to Niagara Falls. All the kids from that team stayed at our houses, and they lit up the lights on a Friday night. I think it was a Friday night at
Hyde Park
Stadium, and we played under the lights. And I think we had like 2,000, 3,000 spectators to watch a bunch of 14-year-olds, 13-year-olds play football. And it was very exciting.
And we really wanted McKeesport. Remember McKeesport?
Yeah,
we really wanted them, but the schedule,
they weren't available.
Because we were really good. I mean, that team was really good. But as we got older, we didn't get bigger. You know, it's funny. Once I moved to Atlanta, I really saw what high school football was all about. You know, we would have something called Captain's Call Out, you know, in the summer where we get together, throw passes and stuff. And we thought that was getting ready for the season. As far as lifting weights and truly training, I mean, it was like night and day from when I moved south and saw all the teams I had read about in Street and Smith. I mean, I would buy Street and Smith every year, and I'd read about the high school teams that were down this way, the Valdostas, Southwest DeKalb, Warner Robins. And when I got to see those kids play, I'm like, oh my God, what a difference. You know, we just love the game. But all the extra, all the weightlifting and all the type of training, we didn't have it like that. I think maybe the Kenmores, North Tonawanda, they may have had it, but I know the Kenmores, because those teams were great that they had. So I knew that we were doing it because we loved doing it, and it was just a great time.
Got to bring up a point here. You had very good success on the Tyro League. Why didn't that translate going up the ladder to the high school level? And number 2, was it because you had 3 high schools and maybe the talent pool got diluted?
And I think that had something to do with it, because if you look at, because a lot of my cousins played for either high school or Trott, right? And then you had LaSalle. And if you look at the players that came out, say in the late 60s, early 70s, if there had been one high school, those guys would have been awesome, because I mean, they had big guys too, linemen. We didn't have the linemen that they had in the early 70s and the late 60s. Our linemen, geez, I look at our linemen and they weren't nearly big enough to deal with Jamestown or the Kenmores or even North Tonawanda. You know, we just didn't have the line we had skilled people, but we didn't have the linemen to be able to compete like that. We just didn't. I don't know if it was the water or what, but we just did not have those big linemen. I remember when Jamestown came into town and Sweet Home, and I saw how big those kids were. It was like, wow, it's different.
You know, Ed, from the perspective of a wide receiver, you know, Larry was our star halfback, and I was split out wide. And so I was very interested in the passing game. And, you know, about our 0-8 season, my dad always told me, win without boasting and lose without excuse. So, you know, we had a lot of reasons to come up with excuses, but, you know, we really can't talk about them. But when you ask what were the reasons in our in a scrimmage against Trott about a week or two before the season was going to start. We had a starting quarterback. His name was Dan Volpe. He's hiding in the back row of this team photo because what you can't see is he broke his collarbone in that scrimmage. And all summer long, as we're practicing, Dan is throwing 40, 50, 60 yards down the field. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we've got Larry in the backfield. We've got a quarterback who can throw the ball 60 yards in the air. This is going to be wonderful. And then he broke his collarbone. Now, I love Marty. Marty Schimmel, great guy. I've known him since, I think, second grade, third grade, great athlete. But Marty didn't tell me this. We had some great coaches, right?
Yes,
Art Calandrelli,
yes.
head coach, a legend, a wonderful coach, wonderful man. We had Frank Scaletta coaching the defense, Chuck Sirianni, sort of the offensive coordinator. And we had Roger Haley, quarterback for Michigan State, Haley's Comets. Right. He was our quarterback and wide receiver coach. Right. So in practices, Roger, he could throw the ball 70, 80 yards in the air. And he would say, Bob, run a fly pattern, right? And I'd take off and I'd start running straight down the field. I'd look back at 60 yards and he hadn't released the ball yet. And I'm starting to slow down. Then he releases it and I still didn't catch up. The ball would be 85 yards. So with Roger as a quarterback coach and really into passing, that's what I kind of thought was going to happen. Well, Roger says to me after Dan Volpe got hurt, he said, Bob, Marty's great, but he can only throw the ball 30 yards. So here's what you have to do. On your fly patterns, you got to run 60 yards down the field, turn around and come back 30, and maybe you got a chance at catching it. And but I didn't catch a pass all year. That's just the way it goes. So.
And not only that, Ed, we had a lot of the players, especially growing up, we played different sports, baseball, football, basketball. And that year, our basketball team went undefeated, and they won the state title. So when football practice started that season, two of the players would have started along with us, and that was Bruce Brundage and Anthony Sanders. Coach Rotella did not want them playing football.
No way.
After about 2 weeks of practice, I remember that third week they weren't there anymore. And I'm like, okay, that was it. Those two guys would have helped out a lot, but that's just the way it was back then. And so we lost them, and we made do with what we had. We, just like Bob said, we had great coaches. I love our coaches, but again, no excuses. It just didn't turn out that way. And again, like I said, when we played other teams, we were outmanned up front for sure. There was no doubt about that.
Got to ask you, with three high schools in Niagara Falls, with Niagara Falls, Trott, and LaSalle, why did you decide, or your family decided you were going to Niagara Falls as opposed to Trott or LaSalle?
Well, Trott Trott was a vocational school, right? So I knew, because my cousins had played at Niagara Falls High School, I knew that's where I was going. And LaSalle was too far out. Then we had Bishop Duffy as well.
Right.
Because I remember when we were in the 9th grade, we went to visit. We took a visit to Niagara Falls High School, and it seemed so big. It was like a whole new world. It's like my eyes opened up. I remember I saw my cousin in the cafeteria. He gave me some cookies, and so I just knew I was going to Niagara Falls High School, because I would go to their games on Friday nights when they would play at LaSalle, and I would see those red helmets gleaming under the lights at LaSalle. So for me, I knew that's where I was going. I just knew it, and I had heard a lot about Coach Calandrelli, so I knew I wanted to play for him. So my choice, the choice was already made for me.
And let's not forget junior varsity,
Yes.
Joe Rizzo,
Coach,
head coach.
my favorite coach.
All fortunate. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Coach Rizzo was fantastic.
Yes.
And yeah, I had two older sisters who went to Niagara Falls High. And so it was never a question. I don't think we were permitted from where we lived. We were
Right.
both in the North End.
Right.
We couldn't have gone to LaSalle if we wanted to. Our choices were Trott, Niagara Falls High, or Bishop Duffy. And, you know, our quarterback from the Moose Bowls, Jeff Cohn, what an amazing athlete.
Yes.
I ended up running track with him, against him. Well, he was a miler and a 2-miler.
Right.
And I mean, what a fantastic athlete. And he ends up at Duffy, and, you know, yeah, that was definitely a factor.
And Ed, you know, speaking of that, we would have practice when we were playing for the Moose Bulls. And so at the start of practice, we would always have to run a lap. And Hyde Park was huge. So these two guys would always take off and leave everybody. It's like, we hated that. You know, if we did something wrong,
two guys?
We had to run. Bob and Jeff, and they would just take off and like go. And it's like, oh, come on. And anytime we did something wrong, we had to run. So it was like they were running all the time.
We love to run.
Oh my God.
Wait, here's the thing. This speaks to Jeff's character, right? So Jeff and I always led the opening lap and the closing lap. And I just thought I was as fast as Jeff was, right? Well, then we get to run track. I'm a quarter miler and not that great, you know, like 55, 56 seconds. He turns out to be a miler, a 2-miler. I hit a, senior high school, 11th, 12th grade. I said, Jeff, you're setting all these records in the mile and 2-mile. I said, I used to keep up with you. He said, no, Bob, I let you keep up with me.
So that begs the question now, Larry, who was the fastest power cat? Was that you, Larry?
No. I mean, I was probably in the top 5.
Be careful, Bob, Larry, because I know the answer.
But Bob was there. When we had a kid named JoJo Austin who was really fast.
Well, he was a quarter miler.
Yeah, but they were fast. I mean, for me, I think I was more quick. I mean, I had some speed, but I was kind of elusive as well. But yeah, because I ran the hurdles.
You had the moves.
I hurdles. Yeah.
But he's talking about the football team, not the track team, Larry.
I know, but but on the football team, I'm saying it was Bob, JoJo was fast, and so no, I have no qualms about that. I mean, I had enough speed to do what I had to do, but yeah, those guys could run. And
you want the definitive? You want the definitive answer, Larry?
Go ahead. Yes.
I took notes. You ready, Ed?
Fire away.
Okay. So every football player who's ever played organized football knows how you end every practice.
Right.
You know, you've been out there for an hour and a half or 2 hours, you're tired, and Coach Cal would blow the whistle and he'd say, first group on the line, and you start at the goal line, and he'd start with the linemen, right? The guards, the tackles, the center, offense and defense. They're in the first group. He'd blow a whistle to run the wind sprints, the 100-yard, goal line to goal line. So the rest of us would be sitting there waiting for the linemen to finish. I mean, you could read a book in the time it took them to go 100 yards, right? And they're tired. But in the ground at Hyde Park would like rumble like a herd of buffalo, boom, 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 boom. But they were kind of jogging. Okay, and then the next group would be the linebackers, right? And I think the tight ends and the quarterbacks, they'd be in the second group. And they'd be a little faster, so you couldn't read as long a book, but you'd maybe read a short story while they'd go end to end, right? Okay, and then the final group was really, at least in my 17-year-old mind, that was to determine who was the fastest cat on the field, right? So that would be the halfbacks, Larry, and the defensive backs and the wide receivers, right? So we'd be in that group, okay? So Larry's right. He was shifty. He was quick. If we were running laterally, sideways, he'd be number one. But we were running forward. So it always came down to we'd run once and it'd be close. It'd be a tie. So we wouldn't know who is the fastest cat. And Coach Cal would call my name and he'd say, Simpson, and he'd call another name. And Larry, the guy wearing that uniform had number 46.
Joe Barksdale.
Joel Barksdale. Here's what happened. Joel was a defensive back.
Right.
And Coach Cal always put him up 5 yards to my left.
Right.
And then he'd blow the whistle for a 100-yard dash. And about 30 to 40 yards down the field, Joel would bump into me and bounce off of me like a billiard ball. And then we'd run a little further and then he'd bounce off of me. And at the end of the sprint, we would tie. And this happened practice after practice after practice. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm tied. I'm the fastest cat, on the field. For whatever reason, Joel either couldn't or wouldn't, I kind of think he enjoyed doing this, run a straight line. He would always run at an angle, right? So one time, Coach sets us up. This is like the last play, the last sprint of the season, sets us up, and I scooted over to Joel's left. And he blows the whistle, and I start running in a straight line, and Joel starts running off to an angle. And the last we saw him, Larry, I think he was in Linwood Avenue, cutting through backyards and whatever.
Yeah, God rest his soul. He passed away a few years ago. Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
Coach Rizzo also taught mathematics. And here's the story. Joel Barksdale was the fastest cat on the Power Cats. Nobody could touch him. He was like 10 yards ahead of me in his sprint. He was a great guy,
Ed,
So
let me ask you a question. Do you remember there was this tailback? I remember my junior year, we played North Tonawanda. We played them at high school. I think his name was Ken Script or something like that.
Yep, Kenny Script.
Yes, and I remember him because they ran like an I formation. I played corner, and that was probably one of my best games because having played running back and tailback, I knew those I formation. You were going to either run a dive, you're going to run off tackle, you're going to sweep. So I played corner my junior year, and I knew every time he was getting that ball, and soon as he would get it and start out that way, because he had tape around his knees, and I said, okay, I got him. And I mean, as soon as he would hit that corner, I was already there. So I remember hearing him say, well, somebody hit 32 because he keep coming into the backfield. So I'm not thinking, but the coach was thinking, because as they started driving, they got close to the goal line. The tight ends were in tight because they were running that type of formation. I'm still not thinking. I'm like, okay, he's going to get the ball again. So they fake the pitch. Tight end takes 2 or 3 steps. He's 5 yards across the goal line. Boom, touchdown. And I said, they got me. But I remember that kid. I remember he was a good runner. I remember that game.
Kenny Script is still with us.
Okay.
Sprinter speed.
Yes.
Terrible hamstrings. That's where the tape was, around the hamstring.
Yes. I remember that because they were around those thigh pads. I remember that. Yeah. But I remember that kid. He
would get the pitch, fake it inside and bounce it outside. Try to turn the corner. And they had a handful every year of touchdowns brought back because the tight ends were holding on the edge.
Yes. But they changed it up. But I remember that game, and I remember him. There were some players we played against, and Bob, you could probably attest to this, but the one guy, it was that Manny Leaper from Jamestown.
Oh, Manny Leaper. So Jamestown Red Raiders.
Yes.
I was a kickoff returner, and I don't remember much about that game, and here's why. I caught the ball on a single bounce, and I start to run up the field, and this guy comes in between our blockers, hits me in the chest, and drives me into the next county. And I'm like, who was that? What was that? And it was Manny Leeper from
Yes.
Jamestown.
Yes.
I looked him up. He sadly is no longer with us, but what an athlete. I think he had the 400-yard dash record for the state. I mean, he was an athlete. He was very gifted, you know.
Yeah. And Kimmel East had this guy named Bob Burgoyne, I think his name was.
He was a track star too.
Yeah, he was a big kid. And all week I remember them saying, you know, if you're going to tackle that guy, you need to hold on to that guy, because they would run this little short, quick pass to him. And I remember bouncing off of that kid. That kid was really good. Those Kimmel teams were really good back in the days. And then we started playing those teams like Sweet Home. And it's like, wow, these kids are big. But yeah, it was. I mean, I remember a lot of that. But I've got a lot of stuff in my scrapbook I have to send you about. But yeah, I remember a lot of that. It was great times.
Got to ask you about a little bit of a sensitive subject. What was the race relations on your team with your teammates, and what was the race relations? What was it when you played opposing teams and went into different enemy territories, into different Niagara frontier communities like North Tonawanda or Mohr or Tonawanda or Newport?
You know, we had pretty good race relationships, because we kind of all grew up together through Tyro, right? And then we started playing in high school. Of course, during those times in the early 70s, I mean, there was some friction sometimes, right? But for the most part, we all got along very well, I thought. You know, at least I know I did. But the worst was going to South Buffalo. We went there. We didn't have a problem when we went to Lewiston, North Tonawanda, the Kenmores. That was an issue. We went to South Buffalo when we played. Now, we were playing Tyro then. They stoned our bus. I mean, the coach, they didn't listen to our coaches or anything. We had to get out of there so fast because they were ready. And all during the game, I know they kept calling us names. They were punching Bruce when he was down. It was terrible. It was really terrible. And for me, that was the worst. In high school, I don't remember anything like that, because I think in the Niagara Frontier League, those teams have been playing each other for years. You know, the Tonawandas, the Niagara Falls, Wheatfield, the Kenmores, but it was South Buffalo. That was the worst. It was, I couldn't believe it. You know, and we're young kids at that time. And I mean, they're throwing rocks. Even the coaches were in on all this. It was, to me, it was, that was the worst. But as far as all of us, again, you know, they're during those times, there were some turbulent times, but it wasn't like it was like in the other parts of the country when it came to racial relationships.
Yeah, you know, when we went into seventh grade, Larry, that was the year that Judge Curtin from the Western District, his order school busing for integration took place in Niagara Falls.
Right.
And so starting in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade is when our schools had started to get integrated. My little brother ended up going over to Beach Avenue. You know, but when we were in, of course, I come from a different perspective. You know, to me, Larry and Bruce and Daryl and Curtis, these are my brothers, right? I mean, that's the beautiful thing about sports. I always felt like they had my back, and I always hoped that they knew that I had theirs. And I think that you'd get that same opinion from every person of every race on our team.
I think so too.
An interesting thing. I don't know if you remember this, Larry, but I think a teacher told me, it could have been my parents, that the city of Niagara Falls in 73, 74 was about 20% African American, 80%, you know, Caucasian, whatever. Well, I don't know if you remember this, Larry. We had a homecoming. I forget the game, but it was October, November, whenever homecoming was. And of course, the tradition is you have a homecoming king and queen, right? My memory is there were 5 candidates in the voting for homecoming queen, right?
Yeah, George.
And 4 of them were white and 1 was African American. So if you do the math and you look at it statistically, right?
Right.
One of the Caucasian girls would have won. Kathy Jordan
Yes.
won.
Yes.
And you know why she won? Because she's just a beautiful person.
Yes,
and everybody loved her.
Yes,
and skin color didn't matter a bit.
Yeah.
And we're all still friends on Facebook all these years later, you know.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, growing up through Tyro, because we'd have parties after the game at the coach's house.
Yeah.
And we just, you know, it was different, you know, because we all grew up together, and, you know, we were so close knit. So it wasn't like, because my parents, my father is from Little Rock, Arkansas, right? And my mom, she's from Alabama. So each summer we would drive down. And I remember we went to a basketball game, and I wasn't aware at the time, but I knew something didn't feel right when I was in that gym. I said, something's not right. It doesn't feel right. And it was Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. And once I started understanding my history and what had took place, like, oh my God, that's why this feels so weird, you know. But all the times we would go down there, we would never have any problems or anything. Then I would be so glad to come back home, you know, where we all just, you know, enjoyed ourselves, and it was no real friction, you know, not to that point that it was in the South. So like I said, we didn't have any problems. And even when we went away to play at these different schools, like I said, we never had any incidents or anything. It was just that one time in South Buffalo that it was just terrible, just terrible.
You know, I think our coaches instilled those values too. You know, Coach Calandrelli at the head, I mean, that any kind of tension, that's not going to happen, right? I mean,
and then Coach Rizzo too. Coach, I love Coach Rizzo.
Yeah.
Coach Rizzo, I love him. I love him to death. And Coach Capitasta. Oh, those guys.
Gary Capitasta, Bob Harris.
Yeah.
Hey, Larry, I saw Coach Riz about a week ago at Niagara Falls High School for a book signing. He comes in, right? He shakes my hand. You know what he did next? He challenged me to a foot race. And he told me he'd beat me. He probably would.
Oh, we did. We had a ball. Ed, I'm telling you, I don't know about Bob, but I think he feels the same way. And I know he does after reading his book. But I couldn't have thought of any place else I would want to have grown up than Niagara Falls. I mean, I had a lot of fun. I mean, the city is not nearly like it was because of when all the plants left. A lot of the people who worked in those plants, you know, lost jobs in the city. You know, I pray for the city all the time because of the shape it's in. But I couldn't have thought of any other place I would rather grow up than Niagara Falls. I loved it.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Hey, when you guys get together or will get together, are the stories going to get better from your high school years?
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will.
You get 11 football players together 50 years after we played, you know, all together, we almost have one complete memory, right? With the fragments.
Yes.
I'll bring. Hey, Ed, you know, I do want to make one comment. You know, since Larry and I share this one thing in common, right? The 2 perfect seasons, 12-0 and 0-8.
Yes.
You know, Larry, I want to ask you this, but when we were going through our senior year, 0-8, every Monday, Tuesday, you know, after a loss, Coach Cal would sit us down, take a knee.
Right.
And, you know, we were a little down after the game.
Right.
But by midweek to the end of the week,
right.
I just always felt like we can win the next game.
Yeah,
win the next game. I mean, he taught us, they all did, all those coaches, they taught us lessons about how to deal with defeat.
Right.
you know, and to 17-year-olds, we think, oh, it's just a game, right?
Right.
But none of us goes through this life without succeeding a little, failing a little.
Exactly.
So, you know, I don't know where we learned more about how to deal with life, on that 12-0 season or on that 0-8 season. And you know who I feel really bad for? Those cheerleaders. I mean, they're cheering for these guys who can't score a touchdown, right? And, you know, they were wonderful.
Yeah,
they were smiling the whole time and being supportive, as were our coaches and parents. So, you know, it puts it all in perspective, doesn't it? You know?
It does. It does. But yeah, they were wonderful times, though, Ed. And that's the truth. And like I said, there was talent all across the Niagara Frontier League. I mean, every team, you know, and I saw it, and you know, and I knew it. But the competition was always good. Everybody was always cordial, you know, to one another during and after the games. So I mean, I don't have any bad memories. I mean, other than going 0-8, but then I can always go back to our junior years where we had a good year. And Tyro, we were the first team in Niagara Falls to go undefeated in Tyro and win that championship. So it was good times, Ed. And this, man, this is awesome. I mean, like Bob said, we haven't seen each other in 50 years, and you know, we got together on Facebook, and man, we've kind of been talking ever since then, and I like that.
You got to come up to the Falls, 50-year reunion next July.
Next July. You know, it's funny because I haven't been back to the Falls in quite a while. My wife is from Niagara Falls. We lived around the corner from each other, so you know, we've been married I think 40-something years now, and once both of my parents passed away, it was kind of hard to go back. And most of my friends, I didn't know where they were. You know, a lot of them have been deceased. So I hadn't been back in a while, you know. So I'm contemplating whether I'm coming back for the reunion. It's just that, you know, you get settled in your ways. You know, listen, I'll sit here all day and watch something on television or read a book or go ride my bike. So, you know, I'm setting my ways. I just had a birthday a couple of days ago. So, yeah, it's
hey, Larry,
good. Yes.
Larry, rumor has it Marty Schimmel's bringing a football to the reunion party. It's got your name on it. I mean, it'll only be a 10 or 15-yard pass, right?
If that now.
But I think you got to be there to catch it.
Oh my God! Yeah, Marty.
But you won't be wearing a mouthpiece.
Yeah, Marty. He was good for a laugh. I'll tell you that. Marty
he still is. He's great.
Really? Oh my God!
Fellas, we've talked about several things in this conversation today. What would you like to talk about that I haven't brought up? Floor is yours.
Wow, you know, the memory there. I'm trying to, you know, that's why I brought up that about script, because I remember that kid. I remember him like it was yesterday, you know, coming out of that backfield. And
then tell the story of you being number 32.
Oh yeah. So the first time, you know, me and my father watched a football game, it was USC and UCLA. And that year, Bob Beeman won the Heisman Trophy, but there was this 32 on the other side. He made some awesome runs. I mean, it was like, wow. So for back then, that number was the number, because you had Jim Brown, who was in the pros. That 32 was the number. So once I started playing, that first year I was on the Knights, Bruce had moved up to the Moose Bulls. So because of my weight, I had to play at the 105-pound level. So they gave me number 32. I'm like, really? Then on the roster, it had Larry O.J. Williams. I said, oh my goodness. And I still have that roster. And I remember when I was on the Knights, I was like Bruce was, and he was there. And so we would go to these games, and you know how we had to weigh in, and they would say, oh, this is Larry Williams. I was like, oh my goodness, they know. So I knew I was in for a long day. But that's how I got that number. Because as a matter of fact, both the Bills used to practice at Niagara University.
Yes, they did.
I would ride my bike down there just to see him practice. I would ride my bike down there almost every day. and watch OJ practice with the Bills, him, Reggie McKenzie, Keith Moody, and some of those guys. And I would just sit there outside the fence watching them practice. But that was my introduction to like football, really. And then we had this huge field. It was called Center Court Field. And they had baseball fields out there. They had a swimming pool. So people would gather there. And Bob, you'll like this. So the field was covered with dandelions. I would go to school dodging those, down to Beach Avenue Elementary School, dodging in and out of those dandelions through that whole field. And so that's where I learned how to like cut. And I would watch, whenever there was a football game on, because we didn't see many back then. You would have to catch the highlights, but you might catch one or two games. But I picked up a lot of my skills doing that and playing football in the streets. And like I said, these days, kids have all these electronics and everything. They don't get out and enjoy the outdoors or anything. I loved it. I couldn't wait to get outside. And I'm sure, Bob, you were the same way. But all those things were so much fun. And like I said, Ed, I just loved it. And when Bob had put that link up to your YouTube page, man, that brought back so many memories. Because I would go, even before we started playing in high school, I would go to some of those games because I had cousins that played at Trott in Niagara Falls High School. And I just remember, and then I remember this famous game at Hyde Park Stadium. It was raining. Niagara Falls High School played Trott. And Trott had this tailback. I don't know if you remember him, Ed or Bob. His name was Booker Harris. And that kid, he scored a long touchdown run. Bob Mazza, they called it back. I think he scored a couple of touchdown runs. And they called it back. He pulled the team off the field. He pulled Trott off the field. I don't think they ever finished that game. But everybody was at that stadium that night to see that game. And that kid, Booker Harris, he gives you shivers. That kid was really, really good. And like I said, that's how I got my introduction to it. Those types of memories, they'll last forever. And what you guys are doing, Ed, I just think it's awesome. I'm pretty sure our old film is sitting someplace in some dark crevice of the school. But what you guys are doing, Ed, so many people were going to see those and just reminisce about what took place back in the day. And I was one of them. So, Bob, I thank you for putting the link up there. And Ed, you guys, man, continue to do what you're doing, man, because I don't know anybody else that's doing anything like that. And it's just fantastic. I love it. So thank you.
We love capturing the memories and the history. And we believe that it's very, very important, not just for North Tonawanda, but its opponents as well, too. And if you look at it, the officials as well, too, that officiated in not the best of weather conditions as well, too, year after year after year. And quite frankly, I think they took enough guff from the parents back then. It's just not today.
Yeah.
Bob, your turn. What have we talked? We've talked a lot. And what would you like to talk about that I haven't asked yet?
Well, I echo everything that Larry said. And, when I reflect back, when I look at these old programs and photographs of my teammates, and in anticipation of this interview, I thought, oh my goodness, what if Ed asked us about specific games and what we did and et cetera? And, I have a pretty good memory for nostalgia and way back things, but in the high school, in our senior season, I don't remember much about specific games. And I asked myself, why? Why do I remember so many other things, but I don't remember specifics of those games? And, maybe it's because we didn't win any games, or I didn't catch any passes or score any touchdowns. And then I said, well, what do I remember? And you know what I remember? I remember the practices. I remember the camaraderie. I remember exact conversations I had with Marty Schimmel and Vince Lorendi and Darryl Bagley and Larry Williams. I can picture in my mind's eye Coach Cal, Art Calandrelli, blowing his whistle and saying, "Fellas, take a knee. I want to talk to you about the game you just lost." And I remember him saying, "Don't think about the things that you can't do. Think about the things that you can do. We got another game coming up." And Frank Scaletta, our defensive, oh my goodness. I remember him. I wasn't catching any passes on the offense, and he saw I had some speed, and he said, "Simpson, come on over and play defensive back. You'll catch more balls that way." So I went over to play safety or cornerback, and I remember him trying to teach me the safety invert and the corner rotation, different defensive schemes. I went over and I screwed something up, and Michael Owens, our dear friend, blew by me, caught a touchdown pass, and Coach Scaletta came up to me, and he had a T-shirt on, and he pulled it up to expose his belly. And he starts patting on his belly, and he says, "Simpson, what happened there?" And I said, "Well, Coach, I thought," and that's as far as I got. And he said, "You thought? Who told you to think? You don't think, you play. Coaches think, players play." So those memories of mine from that year, all about the encouragement, the support, the instruction, the lessons from the coaches, and then the camaraderie of the players. And that's special, that is just so special. Those are my memories of the high school years.
And I think
I'm going to ask, go ahead, Larry.
And just following up with what Bob said, I think if you ask any football player, because you always ask them, especially like if they retired, whether it was in the pros or high school, and it's like, well, what do you really remember? It's the camaraderie. It's always that. It's always those people who touch your life in some type of a way, and that's really what it's all about. Meeting different people, talking about different things, and so I echo that sentiment as well.
Bob, I got to ask you to pick up that photo there and point yourself. I know I've seen the photo, you and that cheesy mustache back from high school, but you got to show everybody. A badass Bob Simpson.
Yeah, well, I grew a mustache at age 14 for two reasons. Number one, because I could. And number two is if you had a mustache and you were 14, you could buy a 6-pack of Molson Golden for $2.02 at a delicatessen on the corner at 22nd Street and Grand Avenue. Anyway, I'm number 21. I wanted number 19 because Lance Allworth, San Diego Chargers, he was my guy. Yeah. But they didn't have a 19, so I ended up 21. And I am in between my dear departed friends, Dan Midlinski, tight end number 83, and our team captain, Vince Lorendi, who passed away way too young too. But let's see if I can do this here. Let's see. Wait, that's the wrong picture. There we go. Marvin Nicholson. There's Marty Schimmel.
There's Marty. Yep.
Yeah.
Daryl Bagley. That's you, Larry.
There's Larry right there.
Yeah. Vince.
I think that's me right there with the sideburn. Dan Midlinski.
Yeah.
And Vince Lorendi and Daryl Bagley. Right. Funny, you remember all these guys even by name, right? Yeah. Don't forget them.
No.
What should people know about Niagara Falls football as the Power Cats back then, as opposed to today's Wolverines?
Got it, Larry?
Yeah, you go ahead, Bob. I'm thinking that's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a great answer off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know that we were like one entity. When I say one entity, I mean you had Trott and you had LaSalle, you had Bishop Duffy. Now they're all one. Had we been one back then, I think it would have been a different story. But we went with what we had, and it was just us, and it was our coaches. And even though Trott was there, I think everybody always looked at Niagara Falls High School as being that school. Even though LaSalle was there, it was always Niagara Falls High School. It was just different, then. Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't seen the Wolverines play. I still read the Gazette. But those uniforms, no, they should have stuck with the red and the gray. That's a big difference to me. When I first saw them, I'm like, this is not Niagara Falls. So if you're gonna be the Wolverines, then you keep your colors. But they should have stayed with the Power Cats. I understand the name change, but
the Explorers are there though. It's a
yes,
melding of
yes,
LaSalle
yes,
and the Falls, right?
yes,
But you got to
yes,
remember too, class size has a lot to do with this, right?
yes.
So we graduated class in 1974. We had 596 students in our senior class.
Yes.
There were 2,000 approximate students in our school. And I think what happened in the Falls, right? And as Larry said, a lot of the factories closed, people left for better jobs in other areas, and the population decreased, right? But those are rivalries. I mean, we were rivals with Trott in football.
Right.
We were in basketball, and in I ran track, and Lockport was our arch rival in track and in football.
Yeah, and I don't, and honestly, and this is just my opinion. I don't think they have the athletes we had. I just don't. I don't. When I look back at some of those Niagara Falls Power Cat teams prior to us, man, we had some really good athletes, all around that city. I mean, you had the Booz brothers out at LaSalle, and not only them. I'm trying to think of what the quarterback name was. Oliveria.
Dan Oliveria.
Yeah, that family had some good athletes. Trott had some good athletes. They had the Brundages, the Barksdales. I mean, we had some serious athletes back.
Yeah, Dan was the quarterback for LaSalle.
Yes.
And when we were in 11th grade,
yes,
he was a year ahead of us. He became a lawyer in Buffalo too.
Oh, did he? Okay, because that kid was a great all around athlete.
He was a great athlete.
Yeah. So I do. I don't think the athletes. I don't think they have what we had back then. But it was just. It was just different. I mean, we were the Power Cats, okay, not the Wolverines. We were the Niagara Falls High School Power Cats, and I was proud of that. I really was.
Gentlemen, this has been a lot of fun. I want to thank you so much for joining me here today and taking us down this stroll down memory lane. I know it took us a few months to put this thing together. Gave you no questions to really prep on in any way, shape, or form. So we talk from the heart and we talk off the cuff. And that's kind of the easiest way to do it, I feel.
Yes.
So thank you so much. I wish you well. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you.
See you soon. Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Pleasure.
All right. Bye-bye.
We'll see you.
All righty.